I'm just setting up the recording now.
Okay.
And we're good to go. Okay, so this session is mainly, I was told that we are going for 2 hours, and I was basically going to go through the process so that you would have an understanding of how TM works, how it's linked to SRM, also to ECC, and mainly focusing on where master data would come in, right, or where the impact of master data would be, whether it's in SRM, ECC, or in TM specifically. So I'll be going through the process. 2 hours is not much time, so I won't be spending too much time in detail, but I will be emphasizing on where we should focus on master data. Okay, so the first thing we'll look at is in the PowerPoint presentation, which I believe you can all see in the screen that I'm sharing now. This would be the mind map of the process, right? The entire process, whether it's for UN-owned equipment, contingency-owned equipment, or for troops. The process would be as follows, and I'm just going to write here some annotations so you know where I am as I'm writing. Okay, so we're going to be looking at the procurement side for UN-owned equipment. We're also going to be looking at the load lists that are used for both contingency-owned equipment and troops, and how that works, and how master data is also involved in both of these processes. Then we'll move on to TM. We'll log into the system and we'll see how the system works and what it looks like, and where master data is quite important, especially when it comes down to the freight orders that we can see here. We'll look to the freight POs, so we'll go back to SRM, but very quickly, just to see how we're supposed to create now a freight PO instead of adding it to the actual shopping cart that we usually do, or we usually did in the past. Now we'll have to create an extra shopping cart just for freight, so we'll be taking a look at that as well, and how that freight PO, if we can see at the bottom, will also affect TM in the long run. And then finally, we'll take a look at the execute and monitor section, which is the last one, where vendors and freight forwarders can submit events. Let me get this box out of here. Whether it's in the CCP system or doing it directly in TM. Okay, so basically this is a mind map of what we're going to be looking at. Okay, and the steps that anybody would go through, whether they're raising a shopping cart with goods or they're doing so through a load list, an Excel file for contingency on equipment or troops. Okay, so we're going to start with the UN-owned equipment. And we won't go through the process of the shopping cart, but at least we'll see quickly what it looks like and what people have to focus on when raising a shopping cart. Okay, and what I'm planning to do, and hopefully this works as well, is here. I'm going to move on to the next slide. So every time I go through one of these columns, right, for procure, for load list, for plan, procurement, freight, and so on, I'm going to link it to this next, and here that went a little too fast. Let me go back one slide. I'm going to link it to this next mind map that I've created based on some job aids and some documents that were forwarded to me by HQ, where it was linking, all right, the dependencies between the master data in TM, SRM, and ECC. So for each one of the steps, for procurement, the load lists, the planning, and the procurement freight, I'm going to be focusing on what triggers master data in each of the system and how that impacts in TM. So we see here for procurement, UN-owned equipment, the dependencies of master data for SRM and ECC. The same thing for the load lists for ECC and the Excel itself. And then again, load list, ECC, SRM, and TM. So we're going to be going back and forth from the mind map that I showed you guys before and this one, so we can see each change. What is the impact of each change in master data in TM, right? Whether it comes from SRM, whether it comes from ECC, or whether it comes from the Excel load list that we're going to be using. Now, this is not final. This is provisional, these dependencies and these impacts of master data. But this is what I've been able to put together to make it a little easier to understand in 2 hours what the impact would be. Okay, so let's go first of all to this first section. So I grayed out the rest, so we're only going to focus on this side for now, the procurement phase for UN-owned equipment. And basically what someone would do is, before starting to track the the transportation of this equipment, someone would have to first start, of course, with raising a shopping cart for you and owned equipment. Now, for phase one, we were only looking at assets, so not all types of equipment, but only assets. And these were mainly procured by HQ, so the missions themselves had nothing to do with it. Now for phase two, we're going to start raising shopping carts for all types of equipment and using TM to track these materials during their transportation. So the first thing again would be to create a shopping cart, of course get it approved, review and submit the PO, and approve the PO. Now here we're very familiar with this, and I'm going to just show you a shopping cart to show what the master data main let's see, impact would be when raising this shopping cart. Okay, then we'll go into ECC and finally into TM. But we're going to go through that quickly, and we're going to do that in the system. Okay, so first things first, the major things in the shopping cart, right? So again, we're going to be using the contract catalog to add the items in the shopping cart. And one of the first things we're going to be looking at here is the Incoterms. And let me just use the laser pointer. The Incoterm and location fields must be populated. Sorry. Incoterms will be selected using the matchbox, and locations will be selected from the drop-down list. So now, these are already the master data, let's say, data that will have an impact in TM in the long run. So already creating a shopping cart, selecting the correct location, selecting the correct Incoterm will have an impact in the long run in TM. Okay, whether these are changed or not throughout the process is a different story, but already right from the get-go in creating a shopping cart, the Incoterms and location fields are master data that will have an impact in TM, and we'll see how that works. Now, for goods, as I was mentioning before, no freight line will be added. We'll have to create a separate shopping cart for that. The PO delivery address becomes the destination location in the freight unit. So we're going to be seeing that how also very importantly in the master data in SRM is not, let's say, defined. The concept of, let's say, PO delivery address in TM is probably called location. So that's, I think, one of the most confusing parts when it comes down to master data is how the names change from one system to another. So what we have as delivery address in SRM is called location in TM, for example. And that may be some of the confusing points. But I have this in the PowerPoint. I've also defined what each one means in each of the systems. Okay, another important aspect will be the purchasing group. So this, we're going to have to default it to planner group that will have visibility on the DTR to be planned in phase one. Okay, so in phase one, only the purchasing group PD vehicles will be the one we're going to be using, and it's the one that's integrated in TM. Okay, so one of the main things will be the planner groups that we're going to be selecting in the shopping cart and how that will have an impact in the long run. So far, impacts for master data are Incoterms selected, the locations that we're going to be adding, the delivery address, and the purchasing group we're going to be adding to the shopping cart. And we'll see how that has an impact in the long run in TM. Let's go now to the next point, selecting the supplier. So here's another piece of master data that will have an impact in the long run as well. Selecting it in SRM will allow the supplier to submit the related transportation events in the carrier collaboration portal. So again, selecting the correct supplier, which of course will come directly from the contract if we're adding the product IDs from the contract, will allow this supplier to be able to submit events in CCP. Now, I'm not sure you're familiar with what CCP is, but it's, let's say, to define it simply, it's a system that will allow the vendors to submit events. So in a way, also track the transportation, whether the loading has begun, whether the loading has ended, whether the plane has landed or has taken off. So CCP, and we'll take a look at that one as well in the system, is becoming quite important for suppliers to submit events. Now, let's say suppliers do not submit the events for this tracking of the materials, then the TM planners would do so in TM. Yeah, we'll get to that one as well. And the last part before we go into the system, the delivery date. Okay, we're going to be focusing on also adding the right delivery date, but in this case, this will have no master data impact, but it serves as the baseline for the new Umoja transportation module to estimate all other related dates. And we'll see how that has an impact in the long run as well, but it doesn't affect master data. So now I'm just going to go into the system so you guys can see what someone would be doing, what a requisitioner would be looking at, and how they would be selecting this master data in SRM. Okay, so let me just look for the training environment. And at any point, if something doesn't seem clear, just let me know. But right now, all I'm doing is just going into SRM, and I'm going to log in so we can take a look at this shopping cart and what would be the important aspects of a requisitioner filling in before we actually create a shopping cart. I've also created a shopping cart so we don't have to waste much time going through all the steps, but at least we'll take a look at this quickly. So let me just log in now. And I also have here the credentials. Okay, so I'm logging in now to SRM. And one of the first things we'll be doing, of course, is raising our shopping cart. Now, I'm not going to go through the process entirely, but I want you guys to take a look at where the master data would be important here in raising our shopping cart. And these things that I've been pointing out in the PowerPoint presentation, how they translate in SRM. So let's hope that the environment is working well. It was 5 minutes ago. And here we go. Okay, so first things first. Before we even start adding items from the contract catalog, the default settings here where it says set values, this becomes quite important here when defining the values for the shopping cart we're going to create. And here's where we're going to be looking at these particular fields that I was showing you in the PowerPoint. So let's click on set values before we even add any items from the shopping cart. And we would have here this box, which I'm going to make a little bigger here, but let's see if we can zoom in a bit. There we go. Okay, I think this will make it more visible for you guys. Okay, so basically we're looking at a number of fields here. One of the first ones would be the purchasing group. So it becomes quite important to have this up to date, and this is where the first master data element would come in. We'd have to select, as shown in the PowerPoint, the one related to the PD vehicles team. Okay, so basically that's one of our first and main selections here. Then second would be the location and plant. Okay, so in this case, I think people are logging into the session as well as we speak. And here we would have to select, in this case, just for the sake of the environment, they'd have to select the correct location. Okay, so basically now the purchasing group, PD vehicles, and we're selecting this one because if we don't select the correct purchasing group right here in SRM, when you go into TM, people, the TM planners or those who have the role of the TM planners would not be able to view the POs or inbound delivery numbers when trying to track or create freight orders in TM. So this becomes very important. Okay, the first selection of the purchasing group is very important for TM. Second would be the location and plant, because again, this will directly translate in TM. And once you start managing the legs, let's say the transportation legs, if you have an inaccurate location and plant, well, of course, you're going to be, when you start managing the legs for the freight order, it's going to be quite a mess because you're going to be sending things to the wrong location and plant. Okay, and finally, not that important in this case yet, because we're only talking about source location and destination location, but still the storage location itself, we're going to be adding that as well. And this point here, and here we're just going to be selecting Juba because it's the one that works pretty much. So basically 3 main fields, okay, purchasing group, PD vehicles, again, very important because if we don't select the correct one here, we won't be able to see the purchase order or the inbound delivery number in TM. The location and plant, which TM is going to be also let's say, pulling this data from SRM. And once you start planning the legs and the routes, this is going to be key for the routes to be planned in the system. And then storage location, again, not that important, but still key so that we can understand where this is finally going. Okay, so under the first item basic data tab, those would be the three first fields that would be critical before we move on to the account assignment. And here in the account assignment, we'll click on details. And we would have to add, of course, the fund and cost center. So here in this case, we'd add 20 SKD. So up to this point, this is something that we're used to doing. And here we would add the fund center. Okay, so basically these are the first steps. Oh, sorry, I clicked on enter. So I'm going to go back to set values. Again, remember, I'm still here. I haven't even added an item from the contract catalog. I'm just setting the values. Again, we were in item basic data. I'm going back to account assignment, making sure that I'm adding the right fund and account assignment so that this can process. And we're going here to the delivery address. Okay, delivery address is what we saw in the PowerPoint before. This is where we would add the final delivery address, and probably one of the most important fields that we're going to be adding. So we would go here to name, select the matchbox, and here under search term 1, we'd add unmissed. Now again, this is just the training environment, so this is the way we're going to have to do it, but the delivery address is a key master data element that TM was going to be pulling information from to see where this is going to be, where the final destination is going to be for these materials. So we have to add this already from the shopping cart itself. So in terms of master data and SRM, the contract catalog, adding items from this contract catalog, the process is exactly the same. The Incoterms will already be there correctly, so we won't have to worry about that. We just have to make sure when we're creating our shopping cart that this information is accurate. So we're just adding the basic details here first before we even start with this shopping cart. And now once this works, I'm just going to pull a shopping cart that I created, and we're going to see what it's supposed to look like at the end and what master data elements are key for the cross-reference in TM. So I'm adding here unmissed. Finally, it's loaded. And once I've added that, I've added already the 4 elements that are key. First, the delivery address for unmissed, and then in the item basic data, we were adding the purchasing group PD vehicles team, the location, and the storage location as well. Now, the account assignment part we could have skipped, but anyway, just to give you guys an idea of the process, this is what the requisitioner would be adding so that the shopping cart has the same information throughout the process. So we would click on OK, and basically here simply add our item from the contract catalog. Okay, so we're already familiar with this, and this is the part where we would be creating our shopping cart. So I'm going to just be closing this and going to a shopping cart that I already created. And we're going to take a look at what it looks like under the each item.
Brian?
Yes.
Of course, when you are going to set values, you will be defaulting all these values to all lines. But you can still, let's say, change the delivery address for different lines. I mean, if I want to send 10 vehicles in Goma rather than 10 vehicles in Kinshasa, I can still create 2 different lines with 2 different delivery addresses, or this is a complication for the subsequent or the downstream process.
No, you could. Let's say that you thought that the delivery address was 1 initially when you're creating the shopping cart, but eventually realized that you have to change it for maybe 3 or 4 of the items, or 10, as you say. You can change it individually in each line. Okay, so here I'm going to pull one of the shopping carts that I've created already, so you can see that on each one of the lines we can add a separate delivery address. We can even change the Incoterm and make a different selection if something has changed as well. Okay, so let me just pull one of the shopping carts that I created yesterday, and we'll take a look at that one. in each one of the items and what we can do individually in each separate line. Okay, so let me just quickly log off because I had it approved, and I'm going to log in as the buyer. Okay, so it should be here. Okay, so basically anything we add in the shopping cart that I've showed you before, besides the purchasing group, which would be key, because if you select the wrong one right from the beginning, we wouldn't be able to see it in TM. In terms of the delivery address, of course, that could still change once you're in TM. Even planning the entire tracking of this transportation, that could still change anyway. So that could change even in TM itself. One of the basic, or probably the most important part of master data here would be to select the right purchasing group from the beginning. The delivery address can change, and you'll see how you can also work with the Incoterm and handover location line by line. All right, so let's see if this is the correct shopping cart that I was looking at. If not, I'm just going to add a new one here. And let me zoom into this one as well, because I can't see anything. Okay, so, this is the one I created specifically for you guys. So we're just going to go into the shopping cart and see what it would look like already completed. Okay. All right, so that's a new one. Let's see why it's not working now. And if I'm having any trouble with this one, which it seems like I am, just in case I created a second shopping cart, just if any of this would happen, which it is. So just bear with me, guys, for 1 second, and I'll open a new one, because I created two just in case something like this would happen. One that wasn't approved, but at least we can take a look at the items added into it. Okay, let's zoom into this one as well, and this is 40. Okay, so this is the correct one. So just bear with me with the loading times. With this type of process, we have to go into SRM, ECC, and TM. So I'm going to be logging in and out of systems quite often to show you how one impacts the other. Okay, finally, here we go. Okay, so let's say that I've already added the values that we were looking at before. I added my items to the shopping cart, and now I have the actual 3 different items to my shopping cart. In this case, we have a forklift, an ambulance, and a vehicle. Okay, so it's 3 assets, and they all supposed to be with the values I added before. So the delivery address would be unmiss. We added the storage location. The purchasing group would be PD vehicles. But now each one of these lines, of course, has individually, if we click on details, we can see and also edit, particularly any of the details for each one of these items. So basically, something that is quite important, one of the first things we could change is the delivery date. In this case, we have the same 3 dates, so we could still change any of these individually. The same thing we can do also with the plant location and so on. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to select the first line here for the forklift, and what we're looking at is the forklift here under item data. And one of these sections that it becomes quite important here, and let me just click on the annotate, would be right here. Okay, so here is what we're looking at just now. Okay, so this is what's becoming very important for service and delivery section here. First of all, the Incoterm key and location. So we would have to add the Incoterm here and also the handover location. So these, of course, could be changed, and we could have one separate one for each one of the lines. And this is very important because depending on the Incoterm that we select in TM, we're going to have to either manage transportation or not, right? So we're going to have at least 3 types of Incoterms, at least for phase 1, which would be XWorks would be one of them. The other one would be DAP, and the other one is FCA. For DAP, we'd have to do nothing in TM because TM automatically processes the anything that has to do with the legs and the source and destination location tracking of vehicles. But for XWorks, the TM planner would have to eventually do something. Okay, would have to manage these transportation networks. For FCA, we'd have 2 things happening. One would be for those that the vendor is going to manage individually. The system would automatically calculate the routes. But for the others, you'd have to do it yourself as a TM planner. Okay, so depending on the Incoterm that we add in this section, this will have an impact later on in TM. And also the handover location here. So far now, this location can be added manually, but eventually the idea is that you can only select the location from a drop-down menu or a matchbox, because of course if you make a mistake writing the location, let's say instead of Yokohama you write Yokohima, then in TM, of course, when you start managing these routes, you'll also find yourself with quite a big mess. So eventually these will only be able to be selected from a drop-down menu, so you can't make any mistake. Again, the plant and location was added from, yes?
But if you make a mistake over here, then you can always fix in the transportation module, right?
Then yes, in TM, you could always change the address later on. The problem is that if you, let's say this is a DAP Incoterm, and the system calculates the routes manually, right? It would automatically start calculating these routes and managing everything. So you would have to, if you don't realize this, you'd have to go into TM and check that this is wrong. If not, it would start calculating the routes automatically with a mistake. Okay, so basically that's why it's important for this to be not manually added, but selected from a drop-down. Okay, because if somebody makes a mistake here and it's a DAP Incoterm, in TM you'd never realize.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah.
Okay. Then what else do we have here? The delivery date section here at the bottom. This is quite important. We can change that one as well here, but mainly the Incoterm key and location, and the delivery date is what becomes really important in this section here under item data. Okay, these are the things that we'll be focusing on, and this is what's new in how SRM is integrated with TM. Okay, for the account assignment, everything works as it used to before, so there's really nothing new in this section besides what we would normally do to add an asset to the shopping cart. Let me just close my inbox here because the every notification I'm getting is distracting me. Okay, here we go. And let's see the delivery address. Okay, for this tab here, delivery address, we see that we have unmiss as we selected before. So all this has been added directly from what we did before in setting the values. All right, so basically what we have to focus on here would be the item data, and this section here would be critical. Now again, you're right, Gianluca, in the sense that we can go into TM and then make changes too, but depending on the Incoterm that we added, this will already trigger things in TM that will happen automatically. So if you haven't realized that you made a mistake, the mistake can go on and then it's too late when you finally do realize in TM. So this is very important.
And what we did today, like some entity that doesn't exist, some location that doesn't exist in TM.
Well, okay, the thing is, since you're only going to be able to select it, they shouldn't be able to write anything, right? That's just for now. But what's important is that, and where I see, and here's where you guys would come in, the master data that we're adding to SRM, or that's available in SRM, it should be available in TM. In a way, it should mirror each other, I suppose. If you have to add the data in SRM and then you have to add the same data in TM, it should match. So these are the things that we were asked a lot by the people in HQ. If SRM and TM are not directly integrated, so any change that you make in SRM doesn't automatically appear in TM once you've made the change, then how does that link in terms of master data? Right? Let's say that here I've selected one handover location, but I realize it's a mistake. Then I go into TM, I have to change that manually. How is the master data linked between one and the other? And how long would it take to make a change like that if, let's say, the handover location doesn't exist in TM, but it does exist in SRM? These are all questions that I'm not sure you guys have the answer to, or how long would it take for someone to make a change like that?
Okay. Yeah, because the shopping cart can be amended or the PO can be amended and going back for any communication that is coming from the vendor. What will happen then should say delete the actual inbound that has been generated before, then okay, probably this doesn't, it's not so important to us because at the end we are just to create whatever the master data elements, but this is just a matter of curiosity because we may also have, let's say, some questions from the user asking like why I cannot see this in SRM or why I cannot see this in TM or whatever else. So it's not very important that, since you don't have an answer right now, but it will be probably later to support this mission.
Exactly. I think you just hit it right on the nail. It's exactly the concerns that people had in HQ. It's the ones we had, Leandro and I, when we were delivering this training. So you guys, I know you're just adding the master data itself, but now how does one system talk to the other? What kind of issues that could cause if it's not updated on time? It's beyond me. What I wanted to show you is at least what the things that we're adding here in the shopping cart, how they would eventually affect TM in the long run, right? So now we're seeing the 3 items that we added to the shopping cart. We're seeing the Incoterm locations, the handover locations, the final destination, the plant. And you'll see now when I go into TM how all this is directly appears in TM. Even though it can be edited, whatever you wrote in the shopping cart is going to appear in TM the way it is. Now, also, people in procurement goods in HQ were wondering why all this information is not automatically updated when selecting the product ID from the contract catalog. Because basically, when we're selecting a product ID, that should already have the Incoterm, the handover location, and all other data that it seems that we're adding here, again, individually in each line. So, of course, we're kind of creating the opportunity for error every time we allow someone to add information to a line.
Yeah, I mean, there are still changes that they need to do to the contract catalog, because if I remember well, the Incoterm location is it's written necessarily as a free text. You don't have any drop down. When you select the Incoterm, then the location you have to write down and say to type in. It's not, they don't have a selection. I dropped down this, so I believe that they should start to change even the contract when they are setting their economics into the contract to select one of the location from TM at this point.
Exactly.
Hi, Brian. Massimo.
Yeah. Yes, Massimo.
How are you? Well, yes, another point about the Incoterm location is that that location is strictly related to the business partner. So every time we have to choose one Incoterm location, it's depending on the business partner, of course. So the drop down shouldn't be so long in theory.
In theory, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, Massimo. Good to hear from you.
Hi, Brian. Sorry, Daniele.
Hey, Daniele. Tell me.
Sorry, the Incoterm should be related only to the contract, not to the business partner, right? Because based on the contract, you can have the Incoterm, and that's it.
Exactly. Once you select the product ID from the contract, it should already show you the actual the actual Incoterm. It should already be there defined. So let's say I'm selecting this specific vehicle, the Incoterm, handover location, everything should be given to you directly once you select that item.
But if there is no contract, of course, you need to choose from the drop-down because it can be anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Another question, but if in TM we need, say, a shipment from many suppliers, many carriers, so we need to raise many shopping carts, one for each vendor.
Well, if you, let's say right now, right, we're raising a shopping cart and we're selecting these items eventually when they go into TM, depending on the Incoterm that is linked to each one of these items, we will have, the vendors will automatically be linked to those items in the contract. So you don't have to raise a shopping cart per, let's say, per vendor, if that's what you're asking.
No, I'm asking about the carrier. If there are many carrier, many shipment vendors.
Talking about the trade deal later.
Yes, later. So this is not
Every vendor.
Yes.
This is normal.
In the beginning, he said the same different Incoterms.
Yes.
So we can have 50, 100 for the same material.
Yeah, the shopping cart you can have how many differences that you want, but then when you're starting to have any PO,
then you choose one.
Only
yes,
one.
You already know who is your vendor, so you stick to the one.
Okay, Brian.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I believe that the explanation they were giving to you is the correct one, right? So in this case, right now, we're only just adding the items. Remember, the freight PO will come later on, right? We haven't even arrived there. This one will already, the vendors are already linked. So in this case, these three, just so you know, they're linked to Nissan, right? And Nissan will be the vendor that's going to be doing all the transportation. And we'll see that now when we go into TM. For those that have the Incoterm DAP, so for example, this one is XWorks, but if I move down the list in the items in the shopping cart, see the next item here is DAP. We'll see that this one, once we approve the PO, it will automatically, of course, generate the inbound delivery document. That inbound delivery document will generate in TM another document, which is called a DTR, which is kind of like the inbound inside TM. And that will automatically start generating freight orders, which are the legs that the vendor is going to follow to meet the final destination. Okay, so we'll see how the Incoterm we're adding here automatically affects TM. And in this case, since it's only vendor related for DAP, Nissan will already, the system in TM will automatically do the legs for you. It's the ones that have other Incoterms, like for example, XWorks, or FCA, like this third line here, that we're going to have to, as TM planners in TM, go into and manage the legs that have not been automatically created by the system. Okay, and that's when our freight PO is going to come about, okay, in the explanation. But the first thing I wanted to show you was what the shopping cart, now what someone creating a shopping cart would have to focus on, what fields they would have to fill in, and which ones are critical and which ones have an impact in TM in terms of master data, okay? So basically this would be it for our shopping cart. Of course, now we'd go through the process of approving the shopping cart, approving the PO, and so on. But I did that part for us, so we wouldn't have to waste much time here doing that. And now what I want to do is go into ECC and show you guys the inbound delivery document generated for the shopping cart I created yesterday, and how that one in ECC is linked to the documents that are generated in TM as well. Okay, so we can see the big picture of what we're creating here. So let me get out of SRM. But I believe so far we're all on the same track, so that's good news. And if you guys want me to go over anything, I will gladly do so. And I know we set it for 2 hours, but if we need a little more time, if you guys don't have any meetings or anything planned, we can extend it a little more, okay, and go on and resolve any of the issues. Okay, so we were in SRM. Now I'm just going to go into, and again, this is still the PIT environment. We don't even have a training environment yet for things related to TM. So I'm going to go into ECC now as an inbound coordinator, and we're going to take a look at that shopping cart I created yesterday. Okay, so I'm going to ME23N, and I'm going to take a look. Let me see if I can zoom in as well here. I think it's probably big enough for you guys to see, hopefully. If not, at least what I'm going to show you is not that difficult to view. So let me just write down the PO number. Okay, so this is the one I created yesterday. So once I approved the PO, of course, as you guys are well aware, we have our inbound delivery number, and now in ECC we have the information of the items added in our shopping cart. So you guys are very familiar with what this looks like. If we're here, I don't think I'm going too fast. If I go directly to the section at the bottom here for confirmations, we have the inbound delivery number for each one of these lines, right? If you can see here, right now I'm in the first line. So for this first line, I have one inbound delivery number. If I double click on this number, it'll take me to that particular item. Once it loads, okay, so now I just have that one line here. And if I go to this tab called TM status, and I select it, and I see the line here selected, again, for this particular inbound and particular PID, and I click on document flow, you guys are going to see now all the documents that are related to the inbound delivery and the ones that are related to the one in TM. So for example, you see here our inbound delivery number at the top and the DTR, see, for UNOE. The DTR is what I was saying before, the inbound delivery document that is generated in TM. Okay, so it's a different number that is connected to the inbound delivery. So once that one is generated in TM, we have the DTR generated automatically. And you can see all these document numbers here. Okay, and the last one, you see that these two are the same. The last one here at the bottom is what we call the freight unit. Okay, this one is also generated automatically. We have inbound that generates the DTR and that generates the freight unit. So that you understand what the freight unit is everything. It's the minimum amount of quantity that can be transported at once. So we're going to take a look at that one in TM as well. What you do with this freight unit in TM, when you start managing transportation, you start combining these freight units together. So let's say we have, in this case, a vehicle, but we can transport that with some other, maybe forklift, because the forklift and the vehicle are both leaving from the same place, going to the same final destination within the same dates, or at least a range of dates of 6 days. right? Beyond 6 days, we wouldn't be able to combine them. But if it's in the 6-day frame and it's going to the same place and leaving from the same place, we could combine these freight units. Okay, so we'll take a look at that in a bit. But these documents, DTR and freight unit, are automatically generated once the inbound is generated. And you can take down the information if you want to, and I believe in the future, and hopefully the near future, you can simply double click on these documents and go directly into TM and see this document, okay, once there's a linkage between them. Now I can't do that. If I do that now, I'm going to get an error message. But the best part would be exactly that, just to click on these numbers and go directly into TM and view these documents. Okay, and the same thing happens for each of the other lines that we have here. So if I go down to the next line, for the ambulance, double click on the inbound delivery number, go to the TM status tab, document flow. I would be able to see the documents that are generated for these as well. Now, if you see particularly for this one that I just selected now, which is the ambulance, we have more documents that we didn't have in the other one. We have our DTR, we have our freight unit, but now we have 3 more here that are the freight orders. And why would we have 3 more freight orders in this one? Because this one is 100% sure the one that has Incoterm DAP. And that's why it's important to have all this, let's say, master data linked together correctly, because in this particular case, once I approve the PO and the inbound was generated, TM is already calculating these routes. As you can see here, the vendor would already be processing the routes, submitting events, so everything would happen automatically without us having to do anything else in TM, but simply monitor, if we want to, as TM planners, what's going on with our shipment, right? If the loading has begun, if it's ended, if there's an expected event that's completed, unexpected event that happened, let's say they robbed the truck or anything that could have happened. But you see, for this particular case, you have more documents that are generated, which are the freight orders. Each one of these freight orders represents a leg. So let's say I'm traveling to Brindisi, right, next week, but I'm going to Madrid, from Madrid to Rome, and from Rome to Brindisi. So each one of these freight orders would represent one of those legs, right? The first one would be like Valencia, Madrid, the next one Madrid, Rome, and then the last one Rome, Brindisi. Okay, so each one of these will represent a different leg. If there's 6, that means there's 6 different stops. Okay, in this case, there's only 3. I believe that that should be quite simple to understand. I'm going to go to the next and last line, which is our vehicle. Do the same thing exactly. Double click on the inbound, go to TM status, document flow, and the same thing here. So we again have our DTR, we have our freight unit, and we have 2 freight orders in this case. If I'm not mistaken, this is probably the one with the Incoterm FCA. We can always check that as well, but I'm quite convinced because we're only working with 3 of them. Okay, so again, you have more information as you can scroll to the right, but all we need is what we're seeing here. Yes?
Yeah, Brian, it's Sam speaking.
Yes.
A quick question.
Good. Tell me.
The default routes, okay, on the DAP, because here we see that it's basically 3 freight orders, so I assume it's 3 legs. Now, if the vendor, for some kind of reason, decides to use different legs, because these are automatically generated, what happens? If, for instance, there's some kind of incident in one of the predefined airports or whatever, they need to change what is the default route. How does that work? Is it possible? Does the vendor do it on the freight order? Do you know what the process is?
Yes, and Sam, sorry, I didn't hear your name when you first started speaking. Good to hear from you. Yes, for the DAP particularly, you don't even have to worry about it. This is just vendors would make the changes. Eventually, all you would do is monitor it through TM. So you would be aware of these changes, but you wouldn't have to do anything.
Okay.
They're the ones who would, yeah.
The vendors are responsible of updating what are the freight orders on the DAP for each leg.
Exactly.
And they will have actually the opportunity as well to create new freight orders, because it could be that the legs increase.
Exactly, yes. They would just be doing this in their own, and then it would reflect in our system in TM.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay, so we left off taking a look at our last line here. We saw that we have the documents and the freight order. So in this case, we have two freight orders. This is probably one that is leaving the, let's say, the warehouse, and this is the next one leaving the port. So we'd probably still need to create more freight orders and manage this last one all the way to the final destination, which is unmissed. But we'll take a look at that now in TM. Okay, so basically, we saw what we needed to add in a shopping cart, what master data elements were key in that shopping cart. We see how that is impacting ECC for our 3 items, and how that is also impacting TM. Okay, so now we're going to log into TM, and we're going to see what this looks like in TM, okay, everything we've done so far, and how this information is taken from one system to another, and so on. And the amount of changes we can still make, because all this information that we've added can still be edited, and let's say 90% of it can be added in TM, edited in TM, sorry. Okay, so I'm just going to get out of ECC, and we'll log into TM now. And here I'm going to come in for the UN-owned equipment. Okay, so this is what the environment, the testing environment looks like for TM. Okay, so there's a couple of clicks we're going to have to go through. In production, they don't have to go through as many clicks. But anyway, that's not important for you guys. And here we are. Okay, so we're in TM now, and this is what the first screen looks like. They mainly have 3 tabs that they're going to be working with. First one is the logistics integration, where they can see an overview of transportation requirements. So this is the first link. There are other links here that we could play around with, but basically now they're not fully working, or not yet available for at least for phase 1. The one we're going to be looking at is this one here, overview transportation requirements. But before I click on that one, I want to show you what the other tabs look like. So we have the freight order management. So let's say now that we want to start managing these freight orders that are already generated, especially for the ones with the Incoterm DAP. I could go here to freight order management, view all the freight orders that are linked to my PO and the inbound, or simply look one by displaying our freight order if you know the number. Exactly. Okay, so we'll be taking a look at this as well. And the last one, which is planning, which is we're going to be going to the transportation cockpit to finalize the other, let's say, items in the shopping cart that have the FCA and XWorks Incoterms, because these do not have freight orders yet generated for the legs that are missing, right? The one with XWorks will have no legs generated. The one for FCA will have maybe 2, as we saw in ECC, but we'll still be missing the other ones. Okay, so before we go into the transportation cockpit, let's take a look at the tab for ERP logistics and click on Overview. Transportation requirements, and this looks a lot like SRM. So even the fields, the fonts, everything looks very similar to what SRM looks like. And at the bottom, we'll have our results of our search at the top. Okay, so if let's say I want to add my PO number, I would do so in this field for original order. Again, we could have the same wording in all systems, would help us all, but we don't. So in this case, the original order field is where we would add our PO number. In this case, it's the one that I was actually looking at before, ending in 37. So I would click on Apply. And basically what I would get at the bottom is all the documents that are linked to that one PO. So all the DTRs that are linked to that PO, and the inbound delivery numbers that are linked to that PO as well. If we take a look, we can see also the, hold on. There you go. We can see the type of order that we have here. Let me move down to the right so we can see what else we see here. Very importantly, you see the life cycle status tab here where it says planned, in planning, and planning. If I move this over so I can have it all in one look here. What I can see here is that there's one line that is planned and the other 2 that are still in planning. So what this tells me is that the planned line is probably the one with the DAP Incoterm. So everything is ready and already been generated by the system automatically, where we would supposedly do nothing because the vendor is in charge of this. we'll take a look at what that one looks like now and how we can monitor the events from TM if we have to, and even submit events for them, because there are cases where even though the vendor is taking care of everything, there are cases where we could still submit events for them in TM. Let's say if they just don't want to submit events in CCP. This was one of the discussions we had in HQ and generated some riots in class, is that even when the vendors were supposed to submit events in CCP and decided not to, we would have to do so in TM. Okay, there still works and talks about what's going to happen with that in the long run, but we're not going to get into that. Okay, so let's scroll to the right here and see that we have the dates of when it's been created. The execution status not started yet, and that's for all of them because we haven't yet started submitting events, either from our side or from the vendor side. We also have our source location, destination location for each one of these. So we have all this information that has been submitted in the shopping cart in SRM is just directly translated here. We also have the shipper in this case. So this information comes directly from the supplier that we added in SRM. So this should be the shipper information for Nissan. We also have the purchase order or original order number here as well. The quantity, so all the information we added in SRM is reflected here as well. Once you're in TM, everything is hyperlinked, so you can just click on any of these documents and view them. Let's click on this first one just to make sure this is the one for the DAP Incoterm. So let's say I click on this DTR number, which is for the first document, and let me maximize the screen. This is what the DTR or inbound delivery number would look like. The first screen that loads is this one. Usually you're always going to be in the tab for document flow. This tab will show you all the documents that are linked to that one document you're looking at. So in this case, we're looking at the DTR. We see the inbound link to it, the freight unit, and the 3 freight orders that have been generated. Okay, so this is one of your most important tabs to view all the documents linked to this shipment. We can also move on through different tabs here at the top, and we're going to be taking a look. The most important ones for us here are general data, business partner, location, dates, and times. Okay, so let's take a look at the general data and see that all this information that we have here was generated in SRM already. Okay, so the gross volume, the weight, all this information is generated from the data we added in SRM. It even tells you here the Incoterms. See, this is the one for DAP. So deliver to place. So there's nothing we should be worrying about in this case, but we can still, as TM planners, monitor this information. Should we make changes to something with a DAP Incoterm, we're not supposed to do anything with it, but there are chances where we can still manage the freight orders. So if we're looking at the business partner tab, we see the shipper, Nissan, we have the information for the shipper, and where the source destination and destination location. Okay, the consignee, which in this case consignee would mean the mission. So again, we're playing around with different terminology from one system to another. We have one terminology in SRM, one in ECC, and then one in TM, which could be quite confusing. I'll go back to the PowerPoint to show you guys how I've kind of linked them together, so it makes it easier, but these things could change. So anything I've added to the PowerPoint may not be final. Okay, so yes?
Yeah, Brian, just one question about the volume weight. Where this information are inserted? Are inserted directly in the shopping cart? From where does this information?
Okay. All right. Yes. Good question, Luca. So basically, this information should be added in ECC when, let's say we were talking about when we were first delivering this training, there was a functionality called packing, right, that the inbound coordinator was supposed to perform in ECC. But that is also expected to disappear when EDI functionality starts working. So the vendor would be the one adding this gross volume, gross weight, and net weight. And this would automatically be reflected in TM. Okay, that's the final idea, is that once EDI is implemented, this information is directly added by the vendor, and we shouldn't even worry about it.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So, but the initial discussions during the trainings were that we had some functionality called packing. And here, I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint so we can see that. Let me just move on to the next screen here. See, in ECC, this part here, when we started delivering this training, the Umoja system creates the inbound delivery document, and then the inbound coordinator would perform what we call the packing. And here's where we would have to add the information related to weight. Now, here I added this slide as well, but I wanted to spend more time in the system. Okay, but here's where we are looking at what you're asking, Gianluca. Since you're asking that, I'm going to go through it. So you see here, currently the product weight and volume is not maintained in the material master. In Umoja production, all materials appear with weight 1 and volume 0. Okay, so initially that's the idea. Now, the pack functionality available in the inbound delivery document can be used to reflect the correct weight of the materials being shipped as handling units. However, and besides the material types that we're going to be selecting, all this was manual work, which again could cause more errors and more issues. Eventually, the last point is the important one here. At the moment, vendors are onboarded on EDI. The packing details will come automatically with the advanced shipping notice. Okay, so basically this last point here is the important one. Once EDI is on board, all this information will be added automatically and we won't have to worry about it. That's why I didn't even cover this part in our presentation. All right, so let's...
EDI stands for the comments with the travel.
Sorry, Gianluca, I didn't understand that.
I say that EDI stands for... What does it mean, EDI?
EDI means electronic data interchange.
Thanks, Massimo. Okay, guys, so thanks, Massimo, for the definition there. And eventually, kind of like an artificial intelligence of a sense that will start linking documents together and update information between systems. Just to define it simply. It hasn't really been yet implemented. We haven't even discussed that yet with Babacar in phase 2. It seems like it's going to be one of the things that takes the longest, but eventually once it's on board, we won't have to worry about the details like these. So our next part here, as we've seen, the Umoja system will create the DTR document in TM, and eventually the freight units. So basically what we've seen so far is what would be related strictly to the UN-owned equipment and how the data that we add in SRM impacts ECC and that impacts TM itself. Okay, so we have this first column of information is covered. Now I know it still seems like there's a lot to look at, but we're going to go through the rest of it. We still have time for that. Unless you guys want to take a quick 5-minute break, we can take a break now. If not, I can just go all the way through.
Yes, it's okay for us, Brian.
Okay, so I'll continue.
No, the break, sorry.
Oh, the break is fine. Okay, so let's take let's take 5 minutes then, and we'll be right back. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Okay, so I just set the recording again. So basically we left off here at this document flow tab, and we saw all our documents. We were discussing about the weight and where did that weight come from. So now that we've seen that, I'm just going to go quickly through the other tabs. So we saw also the business partner. Again, we're looking at one of these shipments for the one that related to the DAP Incoterm. So we see that the shipper was Nissan, and they're the ones taking care of the entire process. So in this case, we wouldn't have to worry about anything related to transportation management, but we can still view the information, like for example, location, dates, and times of when something is expected to depart from the source location, when it's expected to arrive, and all this data generated directly from the shopping cart that we created in SRM. based on the Incoterm that we added. We even have the information of the item at the bottom here the whole time as we're going through this DTR. Again, remember this DTR document is linked strictly to one item in our shopping cart, okay? And it's generated because it has a specific Incoterm. So let's say if all of them had the same Incoterm, all of it had the same source, destination, location, sorry, and also date, delivery date, they would all fall under the same document, okay? So we'd have all these items, the forklift, the ambulance, and the vehicle, all in one single DTR. But since each one of them had a different Incoterm, we have now 3 different documents. All right, so basically, let's go back to the document flow and see now that we have here the freight unit. So you guys can take a look at what this freight unit looks like. So each time I click on one of these documents, the window that loads is going to look very similar to the one we were looking at before. Okay, even here now we have the freight unit. What's interesting about the freight unit is that we have a more global view of the entire process, right? Even here, as we can see, the map shows us where our source location is and final destination, and even where we're going to be doing some stopovers, right? So each one of the freight orders will be displayed here. Already, remember, it's a DAP Incoterm. All the legs have already been mapped out for you here. Again, it seems like we only have here 4 different tabs, but we have more than that. If we go to the folder here on the right, we can see that there's a longer list of document tabs. So let's go to general data for this one. Again, very similar to what we were looking at before, just a little more information. A business partner, in this case, will have the same information as we saw before, but a little more. If, let's say, we want more details on where we're departing from and where our final destination is, it would be here. And this would also be the place where if we want to make any changes in the business partners when it comes down to the freight forwarders, we would have to do this here, right? We would come to the freight unit here and the business partner tab and make the changes here. Now, I'll go into the ones that have the Xworks Incoterms and the FCA Incoterms so we can play around with that and see the differences. Since this is the DAP one, we're just going to be taking a look at how we would navigate through the system for this. Okay, again, document flow is the page where we have all the other documents, this time led by the freight unit. We have the Notes tab and the Attachments tab. So let's say these 2 tabs here would be the ones that allow us to communicate with either the vendor or the freight forwarder. If, let's say, we're monitoring the shipment together, right? So we're talking to the vendor or the freight forwarder, we would do it through here in TM. So any notes that I add in this section would automatically be reflected in their own system, CCP, and they would be able to answer through the notes in CCP, and we would see their notes here in TM. Same thing for attachments. Any documents we need to attach, we would do so in this tab, and the vendor and freight forwarder would be able to look at any documents that we're attaching that may be required, let's say, for loading to begin or loading to end. Okay, another one of the tabs that is quite important here is the status. This will let us know if the planning and execution, as we see here, is already planned. So let's say the transportation is already planned but not yet ongoing. And we also have the execution tab here, which is the one that we're going to be looking at once we have created our freight orders for the Xworks and FCA Incoterms. Okay, so basically just taking a quick look at what these tabs look like. The output management tab, we'll see that one as well later on, is where we would be able to find the SOW document, which is the one that we're going to be using for the freight PO that we're going to be generating later on. Okay, but since it's not important in this one, because it's already all created for us, I want to go directly to the freight orders so we can see what that looks like. Okay, so let's go to the document flow tab again and click on one of these freight orders. Okay, as you can see here, it says UNOE vendor delivered freight orders. So you see all the 3 of them are vendor delivered. We click on one of them, again, page loads just like before, and now what we're looking at here is specifically one of the legs. So the rates for this transportation are going to be here. The status, expected, unexpected events, anything related to this particular leg is going to be found in this document. So first thing what we'll do is go here under the stages, and see exactly what this stage belongs to, right? So is this the one from, let's say, Valencia, Madrid, or Madrid, Rome, or Rome, Brindisi? In this case, what we're looking at is Yokohama to Mombasa Port. So this is a stage linked to this one strictly, right? Source location, Yokohama Port, and destination, Mombasa Port. It tells us the duration, the distance, and all the information related to that one specific stage. Okay, it will also let us know the estimated charges if we go to the tab for the charges. And here's where master data comes in. Where are these charges coming from? Particularly, are they taking it from previous charges that we may have in our historical data? Eventually, when we were delivering this training in New York, that's the idea. These charges are taken from historical data, and basically every month or every certain amount of time, there's going to be a cross-reference performed between the historical charges and the actual charges, and new defaulted charges will come up from here. But this would be the tab that we would go into later on. Let's say if we're looking for a freight forwarder instead of a vendor, and if the charges have changed, this is the tab we would go to in a specific freight order to make any changes. So let's say the price has gone up or down. This is where we would come and make our changes, right, in the charges tab. The execution tab would show us, as we see here, the events. So each one of these legs has a specific amount of events that are linked to it. Now, I don't believe these events have anything to do with master data. I may be mistaken, but I don't think so. So each one of these legs has loading begin, loading end, departure, document sent, arrival destination, unloading begin, unloading end, clear customs. All these events are linked to one single leg, and all these should be processed and reported as okay before we can move on to the next part. These, all we would do here, since this is a DAP Incoterm, is just really just look and monitor these events. We wouldn't have to do anything. We would see how these change from yellow, and if we see here expected event, they would go to a green box and say, okay, this event has already been processed, and all we would do is just monitor. If by any chance we have to update the events ourselves as TM planners, because that could happen as well in TM, even for vendors, okay, if the case occurs, we would have to update these events manually based on what the vendors are telling us through the notes and attachments tabs that we were looking at before in the freight unit. Every freight order has the notes and attachments tab as well. So for every particular leg, we can have communication with the vendors and freight forwarders. We can also see the status. Yes.
Brian,
yes.
To whom has been provided the access as TM planner? To MoveCon, New York?
Yes. MoveCon New York, at least for phase 1, since we were only talking about vehicles, were the only ones that would have the access to do this, right? Let's say the procurement freight would also have access to go into TM to change the rates. But MoveCon is the one that's strictly assigned the role to monitor these events. Also inbound coordinators in the missions.
Okay.
Once we start talking about different types of materials, right? In this case, we're only talking about assets, so it would only be MoveCon and HQ. Once we start applying all the materials, then inbound coordinators in the mission would also have access to this, to monitor and submit events.
So when you say, okay, phase 2 is still not started, right?
It hasn't started yet. That's what we're in the process of discussing with Babacar. Eventually, if things go as planned, it should start around October, November.
So at the moment, if I have a shopping cart or a CEO with one asset, say, and 3 other different equipment, spare parts, whatever, it means that the inbound delivery is split. You know, I have say one inbound delivery for the fixed asset and another one for other type of equipment that I may order from different vendors. Am I correct?
Yes, you would have one depending on the Incoterm that you've added, right? So each different Incoterm on each line would generate a different inbound and a different DTR.
But when you say asset, you mean that all its tasks will be used, say, to TM?
No, that was just for phase one. We were only dealing with vehicles, right? That's why we were talking about assets. But once we go into phase two, we're going to have all types of product IDs in shopping carts. That's why I just keep mentioning assets or vehicles in this case, because for phase one, we were only discussing those types of products.
Yeah.
So, basically, Brian, phase one is already implemented, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so if I have a PO with the vehicle, and then I have a second line item with spare parts for that same vehicle, the spare parts in that same PO is not going to be linked to TM, only the vehicle will, because the system will automatically detect that it's a vehicle and it should be managed for TM. Is that correct?
No, let's say anything that is going to be shipped together. Let's say these spare parts are shipped with this vehicle, right? Because we want to get this all at the same time. These spare parts would also be tracked in TM as a shipment.
Okay.
Okay, the thing is, since that has not been implemented yet, we don't know how that's going to work exactly. Right now, we're only talking about the vehicles. But in the future, for phase two, once, let's say, we're adding these spare parts to the shopping cart and they're part of the same Incoterm source destination, destination location, and delivery date, they will all be packed together in one single shipment, in one freight unit that we call. Okay, and this freight unit will be delivered and managed together.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay, so basically, I think we saw enough of this first DTR. I know it's a lot of information, and again, we had 2 weeks of workshop for people to understand this, and we're doing this in 2 hours, but at least you have an idea of how this works, right? So this would be what it looks like for a DAP type Incoterm. Only one vehicle in this case is the one that we see here, one item specifically. Let's go now and see what it looks like when we have an XWorks Incoterm instead of a DAP one, and what we would have to do in terms of managing transportation. Okay, so let me just close all these windows. Okay, so basically the PowerPoint, as we see here, we covered the first part here, procurement. I took the liberty to write down some dependencies here in TM and what would trigger them in SRM and ECC. So what we call vendors, shipping points, plants, locations, any of these that were new or changed that weren't there before would automatically have an impact in TM and would be related directly to shipping points, locations, handover locations, transportation lanes, and so on. I've created one of these for each let's say, a phase in the process, right? Whether it's procurement, load list, planning, procurement, freight. Okay, so I can send this to you after the WebEx so you can see what would trigger what thing in each system. But let's keep moving on. And let's go back to TM here. And we saw the first one here. Let's go to the second one, the second DTR document, and see which one this is, if it's the XWorks or the FCA. Okay, so in this case, this would be the one that is FCA, because we have here 2 freight orders that are already generated and others that were not. Okay, so again, if we remember correctly, let me click out of this. Remember, we had 3 tabs. The best way, or actually the way we should go about this, is now go to Planning. And in the Planning tab, look for the Transportation Cockpit, because this is what the process would be for us to generate the transportation management here, and maximize this screen. Once we do that in the Transportation Cockpit, we'd have 4 different options. Okay, this DAP is here, even though we have nothing to see, because of course it generates automatically in the system. What we're looking at is the UN-owned equipment XWorks. We select this line, and now when I click on continue, all I'm going to see is those with Incoterm XWorks that still have to be processed, right? Freight units that have still not been managed will appear in this box here to the left, as we can see, and I can also maximize this screen so we can get a better view of that. And see, all we have here are the freight units that still haven't been managed. So let's say there's no legs or transportation management hasn't been created for these freight units. So anything that I can ship together. Let's say that this freight unit right now, even though it's a single number, we could have in this freight unit a ton of things that we're transporting and shipping together. And this is where we were discussing before between the vehicle and the spare parts. If we're supposed to be shipping it all together in a freight unit, it would all be here. So this freight unit would have the vehicle, the spare parts, or anything that we're combining to ship together to unmiss. In this case, we have this number split 33 into 2, basically because the system is telling you that you're probably going to need at least a minimum of 2 more legs, right? One from this source location, Yokohama port to the mission. So it automatically by default tells you that you're going to need at least 2 legs. So we're going to select all the freight units that apply. In this case, I'm looking at the one for 903 because it's the one related to what we're looking at here. So we could select both and go to transportation proposals. And now you'd see what the system will offer you in terms of what are the best options to transport this freight unit, whether it's by air, sea, and of course, great, we have an issue here. Sometimes this happens in the training environment, so I'm just going to do this again. And there are times where it takes up to 3 tries, okay? So if the second try doesn't work, we still have one more chance, okay? So let me just do this again. So quickly, I select XWorks. Once the new screen loads, I select the freight units that I'm interested in combining. Okay, so I'm selecting these 2, and I'm going to try this again. Hopefully, the second time it works. If not, it's been known to at least do it in the 3rd try. Okay, good. So now this is what the system returns. So these are XWorks Incoterms. The same thing would happen for FCA. We didn't do this for DAP because the system does this automatically. And it lets us know, listen, the means of transportation. If you're interested in having this transported by air or by sea, you have the options here in this column. You also can select or filter or sort by either distance, duration, and cost. Even if we can move over to the right here, we can see that we have more columns related to other things, as for example cost. So we could filter by the cheapest, most expensive, the largest distance, shortest distance. So it's really up to the TM planner in this case to select from all this master data in terms of transportation. So here's where I see personally, and the attendees in the workshop in New York saw the biggest issues. First, they didn't understand why they would have to do any of this, because the vendors do this either automatically, or the freight forwarders in this case, because we're looking at freight forwarders here, would do this automatically and would probably come up with a better route. So they saw this as sort of redundant work. But besides that, we have master data here that has to be added. All these locations, handover locations, stopover locations, all these have to be added in terms of master data in TM. So let's say we are now, the freight forwarder offers us a new route to follow. Do we have this master data on time? Do we have to update it? How often? These are all things that I'm unaware of. I don't know if you guys have this information or not. But here's where I see the biggest issue in terms of having master data available and quick. According to the procurement freight team in New York, a lot of the times some of these have to be organized within 24 hours. So if we don't have the master data available in TM, can we still process this within the time given? Nonetheless, I'm just following the process, showing you guys what you were supposed to do if you were a TM planner and had to organize this, and where master data would kick in. So this is one of the main sections where we would have to see the options we have. So in this case, we have stages 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so basically we would have one truck stage here from source location to Yokohama port. Another one, again, truck means of transportation from Yokohama port to Narita airport. Then we'd have a means of transportation air from Narita airport to Juba airport. And then finally, the last one, truck from Juba to Unmiss. Okay, let's say I'm selecting this first one and say this is the one I'm going with. And I click on accept planning. What the system will do now is display here each freight order on the right side. See, we're working with these freight units. By default, it told me that we would need at least 2 legs, but of course, once I'm planning the route, we have at least 4. So now there's 4 freight units here. We have each freight order on the side with source and destination location, but until the point where I click on save, these will not be generated. So I could still go back and make changes to this. Okay, so any questions so far here?
You have anticipated our question, and I just don't understand why the transportation plan has to do these kind of things, because I mean the carrier or the freight forwarder will do and select the route that is most appropriate, and then the city also. And then I don't know, because it's a matter of master data, we are not maintaining the cost. So it's always the cost is based on the historical data or based on what?
Yes, according to the discussions we were having with Babacar in HQ, these are based on historical data, all these, let's say, destination locations and legs, and they will have to be updated as we go on. The same thing for transshipment locations. Now, the why someone would have to do any of this, the whole purpose of TM is for the UN to save money on transportation. So eventually the idea behind this is that at one point we would have so much data that we can pull information from that we would understand where it is that we're spending more and how we could avoid spending probably with better routes, right? Calculating better routes, calculating better shipment means of transportation even. So the idea behind this is that the reason why we're doing this and adding this master data is so that the UN in the long run can save money on transportation.
Yeah, but since we are still at this point, I mean, we still don't have selected, let's say, or awarded any carrier or freight forwarder. So how can we know in advance the different legs? I mean, I can award later UPS that is going on the other side of the world, passing through, I don't know, Panama and then going to Juba, and probably it's more convenient or it's faster, and I will award later with a different thing. So I don't see over here how this may have, okay, this is probably something that you are not required to answer. Because I'm just thinking about the process, I have
absolutely. Yeah.
SPO for an ambulance, and then I'm asking Nissan, and I'm purchasing as X4. Then Nissan will deliver into its factory, and then I have to arrange with the carrier of freight forwarder, and then I don't care. I think that, and probably somebody from PB can confirm this, but I believe that they will be awarding or either by the more convenient price, or either by the faster price, the faster route, or by, I don't know, warranties that the freight forwarder is providing for the transportation. So at this point, selecting the route at this point, I don't see any reason to do that. But anyhow, it's just an exchange of opinion. Don't worry about answering.
Ryan.
Yes, Massimo.
Just one question. Besides the status with the green rectangles, we have a maximum. What is it? I see some percentage on the left. Yes. On the right. Sorry. Yes. Maximum.
Yes. So okay, very good. So this this column right now doesn't really matter for us because it's, again, it's something coming in within phase 2, maybe even phase 3. But what this tells us is the maximum space that we're going to be utilizing, let's say, in this truck, this means of transportation. So we're only utilizing 8%, right, of what the maximum capacity is of this means of transportation. Again, in the future, once we start playing around more with how we can pack this, all these freight units or all these products inside one shipment or means of transportation, we'll see how this maximum utilization keeps growing. So it basically relates to that, how much space we're using in the means of transportation that we're using.
Okay, thanks.
All right, you're welcome. Okay, so basically at this point, all we're doing, now once I save here, I'm going to be generating these freight orders. Okay, it says here, charge calculation completed, data saved successfully. So now these freight orders should show up as when I look at my DTR for this document, I should have more freight orders than I had before because I have accepted these freight orders. Now this again is just provisional. This is going to generate our SOW that we're going to be attaching to the freight procurement shopping cart that the freight forwarders are going to be reviewing and probably saying, listen, this route is perfect, let's go with it. But according to New York attendees in our workshop, 99% of the times the freight forwarder will give you a brand new route. Right? And we'll say, no, no, this is the one we're taking. So eventually we're going to have to go back into TM once we have our freight forwarding final, let's say, mapped out route, go back into TM, look for this DTR document, and start changing these legs manually again, or actually reorganizing this this transportation route. Okay, so let's see how that could happen. Let me just get out of this section here and go back to our ERP logistics here, overview transportation requirements. This is what we did at the beginning. So we have again our PO number here. Let me just apply so that this refreshes, and I believe that we were looking at our second DTR number here. Okay, and we should have, if not, because by any chance, we should have our new numbers here for the freight orders that should have been generated based on the transportation proposals that we created. And if by any chance they haven't, again, yesterday I was encountering a lot of issues with this. Let's see if maybe it's the other one. Yes, it's the other one. Okay. And here we go. Okay, so I was in the wrong DTR. Okay, so we see now here, if we look at the document, so again, just so we know where we are, because I know the first time you see this, it could be confusing. It's the DTR document that we're looking at now, linked to this inbound, and the freight orders that are linked to it, the 4 legs that we just generated now. See here, freight forwarder delivered, FF delivered, the other one was vendor delivered. So the one I was working on was the XWorks in the transportation cockpit, and now we have our full, let's say, mapped out route that is only provisional. Let's see now, looking at our freight unit. Let's go to the freight unit because that's the one that shows us the better mapping of what we just did. And we go here to document flow, business partner. Okay, no, that's not the one I want to look at. Just bear with me one second. Stages, that's the one I want to look at here. Okay, so if we go to stages under the freight unit for this XWorks Incoterm, we have every stage, stage 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, for each one of the source, destination, and so on. In this case, we should have, if we keep looking at the transportation or the freight forwarder, in this case the carrier here, if I extend this column, you see that the carrier right now still says dummy, right? So there's a dummy carrier for each one of these legs. And why is that? Because we still haven't assigned a freight forwarder yet, right? We still have to create the shopping cart for the freight PO and get it approved. Once we have that information, we'll add the freight forwarder and we'll see how this changes. Okay, so right now, all we have is just the legs planned and the freight forwarder. So all this stuff can still change. Once we added or obtain our new freight forwarder, the carrier will change here, but we could also change our destination, city destination, and location one by one. So let's say if I could still go here to edit and change my source and destination locations here. Oh, hold on, a little too quick here. Later on. So let's say we're only changing one of the routes. See if we're here, Yokohama Port. Let's say the freight forwarder says, listen, everything is okay up until here. Your source, the location here is going to change. You could change your source location here in the freight unit and add a brand new search location and apply it, and then of course your legs have changed here. The best way, according to the experts in New York, was to start over again and do the whole planning over again, so we would have the brand new routes instead of changing one by one. Okay, but eventually, just to let you know, this is provisional. It can be changed one by one here manually, or you could go back and do the whole process again as I did for Transportation Cockpit. Okay, because right now all we did is just offer provisional legs that are not yet official until the freight forwarder says it's okay. Now let's get out of this freight unit and check the freight order. I'm going to take a look at one of the freight orders here that we generated. If we go to the final tab here where it says Output Management, this Output Management tab now has the SOW form that we see here. Okay, this SOW form, if we go down to, hold on, and sorry because the screen is quite zoomed in, Document Preview, we will be able to see, as it loads here, the SOW document that is generated by freight order. Okay, hopefully it does come up, and here it is. Okay, so the SOW, or Statement of Work, for this specific purchase order linked to this inbound delivery and linked to each one of these legs or freight orders will be displayed in each freight order that we're looking at. This is what we would be able to print out and attach to our freight shopping cart, and this is how the freight forwarders would understand, what we require from them in terms of transportation. Okay, so this is the document we're eventually going to be attaching to SRM. So in a way, this is how a TM is linked to SRM in terms of raising the freight shopping cart. Now, if the changes are made in the freight shopping cart, those changes are not directly reflected in TM. Okay, not yet at least. If it is in the future, and hopefully it is, that would be a great thing, because right now what we would have to do is once it's approved, once the new rates are calculated, the new routes are calculated, we'd have to go back into TM and manually go one freight order at a time and change the rates. Again, go to the freight unit and change the source location, destination location. So hopefully in the near future that changes, and just making the changes in SRM will automatically change what we have in TM. Okay, so basically this is what we're looking at. Remember, again, you have the tabs, charges, and remember we're looking at the freight orders. We have the charges calculated provisionally in the freight order. Once we raise the shopping cart for freight and have the real charges, we'd go back to this tab, to this specific freight order. Of course, that's if the legs are still accurate, and we'd be changing our rates here. The same thing for the dates and even destination and source locations. All right, so basically now, yes?
Brian, sorry to interrupt you. But let's say that the link between the equipment PO and the freight PO will exist only in TM or as well in ETC and in SRM? Because I remember that before we were linking to the about delivery manually putting the freight PO in one specific field. But now this link between, let's say, the equipment PO and the freight PO will exist only here in SRM, in TM, or even in other parts?
Okay, great question. Right now, the link between all of these documents will exist in TM. That it exists in SRM, it could be in the future, but hopefully you should be able to in SRM go into your related documents and be able to see your inbound, your PO, your freight PO, and all linked there. But right now, you can only view all that inside of TM.
Okay, another quick question. Are all these elements in BI already or not yet? TM
Are
data.
all these elements in BI, you said?
Yes.
Yes, they will be. It's not there yet, but according to phase 2 that's going to be launched in October, you'll have the BI reports where you can pull all this information and it'll be linked there as well.
Okay, then.
Okay, thanks, Gianluca. Okay, so that will bring us to almost the end of this part of the process. So let me just make sure that we have here for our DTR, we have our document, which is ending in 341, and we'll go back to this one to link the freight PO in a second. So I'm just going to leave this like this and go back to the PowerPoint presentation so we can visualize where we are, okay? And let me go through this quickly. Now, I was planning on going through the load list as well, but I thought maybe we can see this at the end if we have some time, because maybe some master data elements are also seen here in contingency on equipment and troops. But basically, what I wanted to see was the planning part in TM. So what we just saw now was what it looks like for the DAP Incoterms and how the Umoja system automatically creates the FOs, right? But the TM planner can also manage these FOs. And then for the freight forwarder stage is what we just did now, right? We would select the freight units in the TM cockpit, generate the proposals, select the best proposal, calculate the charges, which is done by the system, and then again, that would generate our SOW. So this is what we've done so far. Okay, we created the shopping cart and then we planned in TM the transportation proposals. So our next step, again, each one of these is linked in this graph that I'm showing you here on screen. And the part that we're supposed to be doing now is this procurement freight section. Okay, so I would go back to SRM if I was to do that step by step and create the shopping cart for freight, get it approved, okay, create the RFX, solicitation, approve the PO, and finally go back to TM. And here's where we are going. This is the step we're going to be doing right now, is to assign the carrier that we've selected and PO to the freight order in TM. Okay, so we're going to be linking the freight orders to the freight PO in TM now. And if we had to make any changes to routes, dates, and charges, we would be doing that as well in TM, depending on what we've selected here as our freight PO. Okay, so this would be our final step before we go into then executing and monitoring the shipment. And how is this done and how is this linked together? Well, it's going to look a bit, I don't know, a bit strange because, again, right now there's no integration between SRM and TM. So what we're going to be doing now is this. We go to the tab for Freight Order Management. Click on Overview Freight Orders, because now what we're looking at is only the freight orders, to link freight orders to our freight PO. And how do we do that? Well, we have, again, another big list of fields here that we can fill in and click on Apply and get our results. This time we're only looking at freight orders. To make sure that we're only looking at the freight orders that are linked to our PO, we would click on the Change Query. I maybe went a little too fast on that, but I can click on that again. So let me just do it again. So Overview Freight Orders. We display the number of fields here. And I would click on Change Query, which is this link here. And why do I click on that? Because this is going to offer me a brand new list of fields. And the one that I'm interested in is the one right at the end here for UN-owned equipment, goods PO. Okay, I can also add the inbound delivery document number here, which would make sense for me as well. Okay, so our goods PO is the one ending in 37. And if I clicked on Apply, I should only get the freight orders that are linked to that PO. Okay, so we see here all the freight orders linked to that PO. And which ones am I looking at? Well, it's easy because you see the carrier description here is the dummy carrier. Is the one that still hasn't been assigned to any freight forwarder. You see the ones in the bottom are Nissan, taking care of them, but the 4 at the top are dummy carriers. We could also scroll over and link it in a different way. So we see that we have a lot more information here. Goods PO. We have the DTR numbers as well that we can link to, and the one that we were looking at before was the one ending in 341, inbound delivery document, and so on. But now let's link this freight PO to these freight orders. Okay, so we're going to select the 4 of these. Make sure we select the ones that are all related to the dummy carrier. Now let's say this is a scenario in which we're going to be linking the same freight forwarder to each of the freight orders. According to the Procurement Freight Division in New York, there's also many cases where you have a different freight forwarder for each one of the legs. Also cases where a freight forwarder will say, yes, I'll transport everything from source to destination, but then halfway through they dump your stuff and you're supposed to go searching for another freight forwarder. And these are all things that occur in real life, and according to them, this is the norm, right? When you have problems with your freight forwarder and you have to constantly keep changing routes, changing freight forwarders. Okay, this scenario that I'm displaying to you right now, as is the case usually in training, are always perfect scenarios where nothing goes wrong. So basically what I'm doing here is selecting the freight orders, the 4 of them, clicking on subcontracting, and here assigning carrier and SRM freight PO. Once I do that, we'll have a small window load here that'll ask me to add my carrier and my freight purchase order. Okay, so in this sense, I have the carrier number here, which I'm going to be adding Kuehne+Nagel. So I can add the number. In this case, I know it, so I can just add the number here, and right away it shows at the bottom. Or I can go in the Matchbox and perform a search for this carrier and add it to the field. Same with the freight PO. In this case, if I know the freight PO, I would just manually write it in. Again, it would be nice that SRM is integrated with TM and this would be automatically linked together, and this step would be avoided because again it's manual entry and it could generate errors. And I would add my freight PO number, which in this case I can just add whatever I want because they're not integrated together. I'm just going to add this number and click on OK. And that would link the, see, it says it's okay here, even though I have just one error message, but that's not important for me right now. And now I would have these freight orders linked to that freight forwarder. See, it still says here carrier description dummy, but once we refresh or we enter into these freight orders, it should change, there you go, to Kuehne+Nagel. So now the 4 of them are linked to this freight forwarder. Okay, so this would be almost our last step in the process, okay, when we're assigning a freight forwarder. And if I click on any of these freight orders, I can view. Now, if I had to change any of the charges, this is where I would do it for the specific leg. Okay, I would click on the tab for charges and start inserting new charges or making any changes. You see, if I clicked on charges, I came down to the bottom here and clicked on the product forklift. And it says there's a column here for estimated charge, which is the one that was calculated by the system based on the master data. And now we'd have an actual charge that we can still add and make any changes if we have to. Okay, if I wanted to, I could just click on Edit and add my actual charges here. So instead of saying the rate of $10 US, it's $15 US. Okay, and that would change the rate. See, now the actual charge has changed and it's 15 rate amount, and it changes my total here. Okay, so I'd have to do that for each of the freight orders. So basically, now that we've added this freight forwarder, if we go to stages, we should see that we have linked together. In this case, I'm looking at probably the wrong freight forwarder in this case. Okay, we have Nissan, Japan, and hold on, let me go to the document flow so we can see this better. And make sure I'm looking at my freight unit because I want to see all my freight orders and make sure I'm looking at the ones with the freight forwarder. Okay, so here we have all our stages for the freight forwarder, and if I move to my right, I should be able to see now the carrier. Okay, yeah, 7.4, which is Kuehne-Nagel, as we saw before. It said dummy, now it doesn't say it. If by any chance I still want to make changes to the route, source, location, destination, I can still do it here under the freight unit. Okay, and basically that's the process really quickly as to how you would create a shopping cart, how you would create the freight orders, how you would link the freight PO to these freight orders. I hope you have an idea of the impact of the master data from one system to another and how important it is to have the accurate data in each one of the systems. I know the systems are not talking to each other yet, but I believe at least a basic generic idea of how the master data would be linked and how one would impact the other has been communicated and has come across. I don't know if there's anything you guys want me to show you more on this side before I go into CCP, which is the carrier collaboration portal where the vendors would be submitting the events. But I think we should probably clarify any doubts we have before we move on to that. Any questions you guys have?
Brian, now from our side.
Okay, so, all right. Yes? All right, nothing. So thanks, guys. So let's move on. Let's take a look now. Let's see, just to make sure where I am, I'm going to move on to the document flow. Again, this is one of the tabs that allows you to at least visualize what you're looking at. So I still know that I'm looking at the X-Works Incoterm, and these are my freight forwarders. So the last thing I did was add the freight forwarder document. Now, I wanted to show you, what I wanted to show you was how we could visualize all the documents that are linked to these freight orders. Right? Okay, so if I want to see the freight PO that is linked to this freight order, let me click on this freight order and visualize. So before, I think Gianluca was asking where we could, if only TM was going to be displaying the freight PO and all other documents that are linked, or would that be done also in SRM? So in this case, if you look at the bottom here, I'm scrolling at the bottom under the charges, or really under any other, I could go to stages under any other tab. We would see at the bottom document references. So in the actual freight order document, each one of them, you'll have a document reference section at the bottom that'll show you all the documents that are linked to this specific leg. So in this case, what we have here is the document here linked to the transportation request, the inbound delivery document. So the top one would be our DTR, the bottom one would be our inbound, the third one would be our purchase order, and the last one would be the SRM freight purchase order we just linked to it. So in one quick look, we'd have all the documents that are linked to this specific freight order that we've just added. You can manually change that, and you can manually see, make changes to this so you change what you see in this section. I won't spend too much time on that, but if you want to, you could always go to personalize here at the top where we have this little figure, open personalization dialog box, and that will allow you, if you see here, to add different types of data to what you can see. Okay, so stack 1, where it says 1 here, allows people to see different tabs in this top section. And if we go down to stack 2 here, we add a new set of references. So in stack 2, what I added was document references, and I wanted to put it at the bottom, and I clicked on save. So every time I move from freight order to freight order, we can see all the documents linked to it. Now I know this is not really important for you guys, but I just wanted to quickly show you this. As a TM planner, that's what I would do to be able to reference each document to my PO, inbound, and freight PO. All right, so that's it for TM. The last thing I could do if I want to show you something is probably go to the statuses. Actually, execution, sorry, guys. And execution, again, would show me the events. So if things are already in motion and we already have the truck going from point A to B and things were being reported, these triangles, yellow triangles, would change to green. If I'm the TM planner that's responsible for updating these events, because if we go back to our PowerPoint quickly, we'll see that in the last section, which is related to execute and monitor, we have the possibility of having goods vendors update events in CCP, but the TM planner could always update events and upload attachments in TM. Okay, this happens for the goods vendor stage as well as the freight forwarder stage. Now, this was something that didn't make too many people happy when we were delivering the training, knowing that eventually if the vendors or freight forwarders do not submit the events in CCP, the TM planner would have to do so in TM. But so you understand how that works, any change that I make to these events here, handover document, will be automatically reflected in CCP. All right, so let's say, for example, this handover document, if I click on edit and I say, okay, for this first event, okay, it's already being locked. So I guess I have too many windows open at once. If I make a change to any of this, and since we're out of time and I know you guys have other things to do, just quickly, if I made any changes to this event, it would automatically affect CCP. And once Nissan or Kuehne+Nagel goes in to CCP to monitor the events, they would see that one of these events has already been submitted. Okay, and then they could submit the next one, and the next time as a TM planner you come into TM, you would see that the yellow triangle has changed to green, meaning Nissan has already approved the next step for loading begin. Okay, so let's just take a quick and final look at what the CCP system looks like, and I'll let you guys go. Okay, unless you guys want me to go on for a little longer, I could. It's up to you guys. You guys are the bosses, so let me know. If you need an extra half an hour, we can do that. If 5 minutes is enough, I'll go with 5 minutes, okay? Just let me know.
No, Brian, you are going far behind what we were expecting, so it's okay for me.
Okay, okay. 2 hours of me is enough, eh, Gianluca? Okay,
no,
let me just see.
Because you really not supporting the system, so it was interesting to see how, let's say, our master data element will affect the system and how this, the entire transportation module will work. But let's say that we will not do things the system, of course, likely, and we'll I hope not support them as well. So let's say that we will keep you busy when we will be tasked to do something different. But at this moment, it was quite interesting to understand how the different systems are linked and how the documents are passed from one to the other one. And then I believe that the main question that we were having, let's say, some interest on. So no problem. With 5 minutes it will be more than okay. If you show this collaboration portal with the vendors, then it will be just great.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Gianluca. All right, guys. So quickly, this is what the CCP, the collaboration portal looks like. So again, if I'm either Nissan or Kuehne+Nagel, I would be able to log in to the system, writing in my credentials, of course. And once we log in, if there are freight orders that are pending, right on the very first screen, I would be able to see here freight orders for execution 39 open, right? So it's actually, this is probably the most friendly, user-friendly system there is so far. So basically, just by clicking on that big box that says there are 39 pending items, it would take us to this a brief report of what are those freight orders. They're all here. What is the next step? So you see the majority of these still haven't even begun loading. I can scroll down to see all of them. So all these, see, one of them is loading begin, the other one is loading end. So we can see that this freight order has already been played around with. We can also scroll to the right and see more information linked, so destination, source locations. Probably one of the most interesting things towards the end here, of course, would be what goods PO is linked to that freight order. That would be really our interesting point here, instead of going crazy looking through all of them. if there's a freight PO, we would be able to see this. So in this case, since I'm only looking at the vendor Nissan, I'm only seeing the goods PO. If I log in as Cuneneo, I would be seeing the freight PO, or even the MOU reference number if I had uploaded one of those load lists that we didn't have a chance to look at for CEO or troops. We would have an MOU reference number instead of a freight PO or a goods PO. Okay, so let's say I only want to look at the PO that I was working on before. I would write it here, 98837, and that will give me only the ones linked to the PO that I'm supposed to be submitting freight orders for. So we see none of these have begun yet. We have first Nissan, Yokohama, Mombasa, Nissan, and Yokohama again. So these probably belong to a different transportation proposal. So I'm going to go to the top one. Even though we can confirm things right from this screen, just so you have a quick look at what this looks like and what Nissan would be seeing, they would click on that freight order, and they would be able to see on the side here everything linked to that goods PO and exactly who the shipper is, who the consignee is. So again, this is going to Sudan, and they would start submitting events simply by clicking here on loading begin, for example, adding the correct date and time. I think it's quite zoomed in on the screen, so I'm going to have to move over to the right. Okay, now it's a bit slow, but anyway, guys, you get the idea. This is what the system would look like. You would write down the date, even the reason, if any, would be here. And once, let's say, if we said, okay, so the first part is done here, we even can write in the time if we had to, and click on the update events, or in this case, here we would have, okay, our first event submitted. See, status, green check mark for the first leg, for loading begin, and so on. I would do it for the loading and the departure, and this is only for one of the legs at the top, which is Nissan trading code to Yokohama. We have the second one, which would be the Yokohama part, and other fields that we could fill in. Again, this would take more time to explain, but just so you have an idea, this is how Nissan would be submitting events. Now, once I go back into TM, this loading begin portion here would also show up in TM. Instead of a yellow triangle, it would be a green square saying that Nissan has already submitted the first event here for loading begin. Okay, so basically, very quickly, that was it. Okay, just everything I wanted to show you, we've been able to show you in this 2 hours. So hopefully it's clear. Thank you, guys. And anything you need, I'm an email away. If we need to have another refresher of these, just let me know, and we can have one as well. Okay, so thank you, guys, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks a lot.